Here is Clemson through the eyes of the Tiger as seen during the 1970s. Our first Tiger in the 70s was Randolph Dunbar Jones Jackson. Randy was the number one Tiger during the 1970 through 72 academic years. He earned a Bachelor of Science degree in Political Science in 1973 and a Master of English degree in 1975. His hometown was Camden, South Carolina. After graduating from Clemson, Randy Jackson became a professor of English at Brevard College in Brevard, North Carolina. Randy was originally diagnosed with non-Hodgkin's lymphoma and adenocarcinoma in December 1981 over Christmas break, and was told he had very little time to live. Well, after a 13-year battle against cancer, Randy passed away in 1994. His son, Joe, shared these stories about Randy's life as the Tiger in a 2005 Father's Day article on TigerNet. Randy entered Clemson in the fall of 1969, as all freshmen did, as a rat. The Clemson freshmen were required to wear beanie hats over a shaved head and pretty much memorize the Rat Pack. Randy went through the usual motions and made it through his first year without incident. After Randy's freshman year, he knew he wanted to be a real part of Clemson. He wasn't satisfied with just being part of the crowd. He wanted to do something special. He was already hooked on Clemson football, and being a player wasn't an option. So he did the next best thing. He became the Tiger. I'm assuming most of you have never worn the Tiger suit. If you have, you can attest that it was not made for hot weather. When Randy was the Tiger, he wore the older version of the Clemson Tiger suit. It wasn't until the year after he was the Tiger that they switched to a new, more modern-looking suit. During the Jackson years, the Tiger didn't do push-ups after touchdowns. Instead, on occasion, Dad would climb the goalpost and release balloons. In 100-degree weather, this can be as daunting a task as today's push-ups. To alleviate some of the heat, I was told that on occasion an ice-cold fifth of whiskey was taped just below the neck hole on the inside of the Tiger suit. Randy never got drunk and rarely buzzed because of the intense heat and sweat, but the alcohol was enough to take his mind off the heat during some games. A funny story my granny, Sidney J. Jackson, likes to tell happened in 1971 when Clemson traveled to Auburn. During the pregame coin flip, Auburn's head coach Ralph "Shug" Jordan said to my father, "Hello, Randolph, glad to see you again," while Randy was in full Tiger uniform. Baffled and confused, Randy was speechless and just nodded. As it turned out, Coach Shug was a good friend of Randy's uncle and had been informed that Randy was the Tiger. Needless to say, being on the road in a hostile environment, Jackson wasn't expecting someone to call him by his name while fully dressed out. Final score that day, number 5 Auburn 35, Clemson 13. Randy would remove the head to celebrate scores during games. There was a picture of him in the Daily Item newspaper in Sumter after his final football game as the Tiger at the Clemson, South Carolina game in Columbia in 1971. Final score, Clemson 17, South Carolina 7. Jackson was respected as the Tiger and remained a relative unknown even though he celebrated with his head off. After his 2 years as the Tiger, he was offered the opportunity to be Clemson's head cheerleader and take the leadership position. Randy agreed graciously. In 1972, Randy had the privilege of traveling to Norman, Oklahoma as the head cheerleader. On many of these football road trips, the Tigers were constantly ridiculed and taunted by opposing fans. This seems to come with the territory with the visiting team. Final score, number 2 Oklahoma 52, Clemson 3. To say the least, my dad was a character. Family members tell me I got my sense of humor from him, and I don't think I've ever met anyone who could entertain as well. This was his greatest gift. He also possessed the gift of sarcasm. This was not as well received during my father's time as the head cheerleader. He received a lot of compliments. However, he also received a lot of criticism. George Bennett, former Clemson head cheerleader and executive director of IPTAY, told me once when I was a child, "Your father, Randy, really shook things up. He was probably the best we ever had." I'll never forget that. Nor will I forget the hundreds of other people I've bumped into who either personally knew or knew of my dad from his Clemson days. They always had something nice to say. Through all the criticism and praise, my father stood up for what he believed in, and he believed in Clemson. Randy had uncontrollable stomach pains, and after diagnosis, doctors performed exploratory surgery on him. At the time, there was no successful form of cancer treatment. There was, however, an experimental treatment at Emory University Hospital in Atlanta that presented a small chance of eliminating his cancer. When you have cancer, any chance is a glimmer of hope. Almost 14 years later, after hundreds of tumors and countless chemo sessions, lymphoma finally beat my father, Randolph Dunbar Jones Jackson. There is no bigger hero in my life than my father, and every minute of every day I know that my father was a hero to many others. He changed lives with his humor. In his teachings at Brevard, he inspired others with his writing, and he encouraged others with his cheers at Clemson. My father left us too early. He probably would have fit in nicely on TigerNet today. Any man can get cancer, but not just any man will fight it. Any man can get called names and put down, but not just any man will stand firm for people they love. Any man can be funny and make others laugh, but not just any man can change your life. Any man can have a child, but it takes more than just any man to be a daddy. Not just any man will carry on when they're faced with defeat or trying times. Mike Hunt was the #1 Tiger during the 1972 through 74 academic years. Mike earned a Bachelor of Science degree in Parks, Recreation, and Tourism in 1974. His hometown, Pickens, South Carolina. Here is his story. My Johnstone Hall dormitory supervisor was Carlos Quintero, a varsity cheerleader, who encouraged me to try out for the freshman cheerleading squad in 1970. He said it was a great way to meet girls and attend all the games. Fortunately, I made the freshman squad. In 1971, I tried out and made the varsity squad as a line cheerleader. The next year, I became the Tiger. There was a newly designed Tiger suit coming, and I was on cloud 9. It was the first time anyone would see the new suit, created by a New York costume designer. In my mind, it was the introduction of the current Tiger mascot. The Clemson Tiger was above and beyond the other mascots, especially in the ACC. There were many schools that didn't even have a student mascot. We did it the right way, and it was great. At the time, there were no rules about how to wear the suit. The one thing I noticed in previous years was that mascots didn't always wear the head. I think the main reason was because it was so difficult to see how to walk around. I genuinely loved the suit, especially the head, and always kept it on unless I was asked by the administration or someone taking pictures to remove it. No one likes rats. However, in the military South, freshman students used to wear a beanie hat at all times and came to be known as rats. The rats at Georgia Tech were like the pesky rodents that try to get into your home. In October 1972, at Bobby Dodd Stadium, these rodents were instructed to retrieve my tail. Signs offered free beer to anyone who could make it happen. Georgia Tech's precursor mascot to Buzz wandered out onto the field. He looked like he was in black footy pajamas with a yellow inflatable stinger sewn in his behind. He motioned for the country gentleman, David Vaughn, and me to come over to him. I was perched on the crossbar of the goalpost at the time. It was too tempting not to go, so we went down to meet him. We started pushing each other around, and then David maneuvered behind him and knelt down as I pushed him over. He hit the ground as the Tech football team was running out onto the field, followed by 25 to 30 rats. As we moved toward our sideline, I got knocked to the ground, and they stole my tail. I picked myself up as Lee Proctor, now a prominent doctor in Conway, led the cheerleaders in a charge to my rescue. I saw one of the rat's eyeglasses go flying in the air. Lee retrieved the tail and held it up for everybody to see. The tail was taken back just as quickly as it was snatched off. Several rats were then handcuffed and led off by Georgia State troopers. We then learned that the president of Georgia Tech had called Clemson President Dr. R.C. Edwards and asked that he not send the Tiger to the game. They had suspected that this was going to happen. Well, thank goodness Dr. Edwards let us go, even though I was not made aware of the warning. Final score was Georgia Tech 31, Clemson 9. A year later, Dr. Edwards got a similar call from Tech's president pleading, "Don't send the mascot." Dr. Edwards said no, the Tiger would be there. The freshman football team, dressed in coat and tie, were my protective escort. It was clear to all but about 10 rats who charged the field and were quickly cuffed and carried off to jail. Final score that day, Georgia Tech 29, Clemson 21. During my 2 years as the Tiger, the cheerleaders and I did several commercials for Hardee's, a longtime sponsor of Clemson athletics. Each time we got free hamburgers and fries for appearing in the commercial. It was an enjoyable experience for this hungry mascot and his fellow cheerleaders. On the morning of the homecoming football game in 1973, I was picked up by the personal chauffeur of Jerry Richardson, owner of Hardee's and later the Carolina Panthers, in Mr. Richardson's Rolls-Royce. He told me he would take me anywhere I wanted to go around campus or in Clemson. People would stare at the limo because you never saw anything like that in Clemson. Ever so often we'd stop, the chauffeur would walk around to my door, open it, and the Tiger would step out to the surprise of the fans. Just before kickoff, he drove me straight to midfield of Frank Howard Field, inside Memorial Stadium, for a grand entrance. It was definitely impressive. Final score that day, Clemson 32, Virginia 27. One time, going to a basketball game from my parents' home in Pickens, I forgot I had placed the head on the roof of the car. As I backed down the driveway, the head rolled off the roof and under the car. I almost had a heart attack because I knew I had run over it. Now, I loved the head, and up to that point, I had guarded the new Tiger suit like it was my own child. How could I have done this? When I got out and looked under the car, I saw the head had escaped injury. Oh, what a relief. The question I'm most often asked is about the push-ups. I was a pre-push-ups Tiger, but this has grown to be a very popular tradition for the Tiger. All former mascots watch the current mascots. It's part of our DNA. The current Tigers are way ahead of us old-timers when it comes to props. However, we always had a rubber chicken or a toilet plunger when playing South Carolina. I miss the Model A Ford that I got to ride in with the cheerleaders. I've always wondered what happened to it until I found out during the writing of this book. It was sold by Cole Thomas, Zero Thomas's daughter. That car was a great prop for the mascot and cheerleaders. My dad, Woody, graduated from Clemson in 1944, my sister, Jean, in 1975, and my twin sons, Coleman and Edward, were 2015 graduates. We are surely a Clemson family. As well as continuing a great Clemson legacy, some of my best memories come from my days as the Tiger. Even today, being the Tiger is still a great icebreaker/door opener. Our next Tiger is Tony Saad. Tony was the #1 Tiger during the 1974 through 76 academic years. Tony earned a Bachelor of Science degree in Textile Science in 1977. His hometown, Addison, South Carolina. Here is Tony's story. My first experience in the suit was in September 1974 at College Station, Texas, home to Texas A&M. It was a true honor considering the military history both schools shared. During World War II, Clemson was the non-military institution that had the second most officers, 376 killed in the war. A&M, unfortunately, had a greater loss of life. The game wasn't very exciting since we lost to the Aggies for the second consecutive year. After the game, I was jumped on the field by several A&M students. They tackled me, ripped the Tiger head off, and went running toward the exit. Little did they know that a future NFL first-round draft pick and Super Bowl champion tight end Benny Cunningham was still on the field, and he saw what was happening to his Tiger. Well, he chased down that student with the head and politely made him give it back. I wonder how influential he was. It didn't seem to take much convincing for the student to give up the tiger head. Final score, number 20, Texas A&M 24, Clemson nothing. After 2 road losses, we returned home and life turned for the better. I often rode a moped with my suit on around the parking lots before games to hit as many tailgating spots as possible. I quickly learned who had the best food and the best drink. Thank you to those who have ever fed one of our mascots. A poor college student appreciates your hospitality. But after tailgating, it was time to get to work. A couple of days prior to the Georgia Tech game, I found a toilet from a building on campus that was being demolished. Needing a prop, I took it and used it at midfield before the game to sit and read the newspaper. When I was finished with the paper, I jumped up and pulled a stuffed yellow jacket out of the throne. Final score that day was Clemson 21, Georgia Tech 17. With a win over Georgia the next weekend, the Tigers finally owned the state of Georgia with back-to-back wins. It was the first time in 26 attempts over a 68-year span to accomplish this feat. Final score that day, Clemson 28, Georgia 24. My moped days quickly came to an end at the final home game when we hosted the Chickens. Somebody let a live rooster on the field before the game, and I chased it with the moped. Well, this ended with a reprimand from the administration. Sure am glad PETA was not around back in the 70s. Final score, Clemson 39, South Carolina 21. During the 1974-75 men's basketball season, I witnessed from the floor of Littlejohn the play of Wayne Tree Rollins and Skip Wise as they beat number 3 Maryland 83-82, and number 10 North Carolina 80-72. Then the 16th-ranked Tigers went on to defeat number 4 North Carolina State 92-70 with their star player David Thompson. The second game of the 1975 football season was at the University of Alabama. I went down on the newly named Bryant-Denny Stadium field before the game as the teams were warming up. I made it a point to introduce myself to legendary head coach Bear Bryant. I remember telling him that I had never met a living legend. He was very pleasant, shook my hand, and asked where I was from. I said, Anderson, South Carolina. He then asked if it got hot in that suit. I said, well, Coach, it does get warm. It's not quite so warm when we win, but it seems to get hotter when we lose. He smiled and said, well, you're going to be damn hot tonight. He was right. The Alabama game was a great memory, even in defeat. It was something I still laugh about today. Final score, number 14, Alabama 56, Clemson nothing. After 2 years wearing the suit, I became the mic man in 1976. It was a very different job considering the team went 3-6-2. The underdog Tigers beat the Gamecocks in the final game of the year, and it was fun talking trash throughout the game. This was Coach Red Parker's final game at the helm for the Tigers. Final score, Clemson 28, South Carolina 9. As I look back, I'm amazed at how many people remember that I was the Tiger. Thank you to all the Tiger faithful. It was a fun experience that I'll never forget. I'm glad you haven't forgotten what the mascots were able to get away with prior to all the sportsmanship rules mascots must abide by today. It was neat getting to sit on the crossbar before some of the games, waiting on the team to run down the hill. It gave a bird's-eye view of the most exciting 25 seconds in college football, as coined by television announcer Brent Musburger. The second half of the 70s saw George Langstaff as the number 1 Tiger during the 1976 football season. George earned a Bachelor of Science degree in mechanical engineering in 1978. His hometown, Kingsport, Tennessee. Here is his story. My career started as a cheerleader in 1975. Then I switched to being the Tiger for the 1976-77 school year and returned to be the head cheerleader and mic man my last year. Usually when someone got called to the Commandant of Cadets during Clemson's military years, 1889 to 1963, they were in trouble. By the time I came along, the college had become a university in 1964, and students were sent to the Dean of Students' office for discipline. When I went to the dean's office, it was to get the suit that was stored in a bass drum case. It had been cleaned, but I remember it being very heavy to wear, and it was hard to see through the nostrils of the head. It was like wearing a giant rug. The smell became worse as the season went on, and the sweat layers soaked into the suit. The best description I can give you would be, imagine yourself locked up in a small space with piles of old sweaty gym clothes surrounding you. Now, I know what my mom went through picking up my clothes when I was growing up. Sorry, Mom. The only way to care for the suit was to air it out in the apartment and occasionally have it dry cleaned. I remember Nancy Sasser, then my girlfriend and my wife since 1977, wanted me to take a shower as soon as I could after a game. Understandably. They say humans are attracted to each other by each other's scent. So, Nancy, which scent attracted you to me? Was it pre- or post-shower? Well, the tiger suit has been used for many Tigerama skits since 1956. Tigerama is the annual pep rally put on by the Blue Key Honor Society that is held the evening before the homecoming football game each year. I recall being in a skit as we spoofed Mel Brooks' movie Young Frankenstein. My most memorable time in the suit away from campus was in Greenville when Coach Howard was being roasted at a fundraiser. In attendance was Coach Bear Bryant. Coach Howard was a 1931 graduate of Alabama, where he was a star lineman on their January 1st, 1931 Rose Bowl team. The number one Tiger during the 1976-77 basketball season was David Baird. David earned a Bachelor of Science degree in Animal Science in 1977 and a Doctor of Medicine degree in 1986 from the Medical University of South Carolina. His hometown, Darlington, South Carolina. Here is his story. The cannon was kept in my room for 3 years between 1974 and 76. I must admit it came in handy on several occasions. They would put us in jail today for some of the things we did, so I hope the statute of limitations has expired. The porch roof of Wanamaker Hall was an excellent location to fire the cannon after some successful streaking, or climbing the steps to the fraternity quad in Guy Hendricks's Bronco, and a variety of other events. We even fired it to finish off some really good parties. There I was standing on the hill in 1974 prior to our home opener with Georgia Tech. It was the first time I was able to fire the cannon in front of the Clemson faithful and a television audience. Looking across the field, I could see the players exit the locker room to board the bus. A couple of minutes passed, and I suddenly heard the roar of the crowd as the buses pulled up to the east end zone. As the players unloaded to touch the rock, Tiger Band began to form the tunnel. It was showtime. All I had to do was pull the cord to the cannon to set everything in motion. On cue, I pulled the cord. Nothing. I quickly pulled again, and the result was the same. Nothing. I knew I put the shell in the cannon. How hard could this be? Just pull the cord. There was no third time pulling the cord. It was time to run and get out of the way of the team. Maybe I should have taken the box of shells and rubbed them on the rock or something. Once the game started, I figured out how hard to pull the cord to make it fire. Shooting the cannon puts you in the game without actually playing. Until the mid-90s, we shot the cannon on the same end of the field the Tigers were heading to score. This puts you next to the action all the way toward the end zone. I was very careful to be in the clear when I pulled the cord to fire it, and luckily never received any complaints. Well, almost never. Today, the cannon is on the opposite end of the field, away from the direction Clemson is heading, for safety reasons. The only thing that saved me on that day was a 4-yard game-winning pass from Mike O'Kane to Benny Cunningham midway in the fourth quarter. Final score, Clemson 21, Georgia Tech 17. At the Georgia game in 1975, I was told on arrival at Sanford Stadium not to shoot the cannon. Their stadium is named after former University of Georgia English professor Dr. Stedman Vincent Sanford. He later became president and chancellor of the University of Georgia. The first time we kicked off, they promptly confiscated the cannon. We found out later that Uga 3, the Georgia Bulldog mascot, was gun-shy. Well, it wasn't my fault the dog wasn't wearing earplugs. Final score, number 19, Georgia 35, Clemson 7. A week after Valentine's Day in 1976, Norm Sloan's nationally ranked North Carolina State Wolfpack basketball team arrived in Tigertown. During the game, Coach Sloan all of a sudden began yelling at me. He thought I had said something to the mother of his superstar, Clyde the Glide Austin, who was sitting behind their bench. I hadn't, but the distraction might have helped in the outcome of the game. Coach Sloan must not know that mascots do not talk while in character. Final score, Clemson 103, number 12, North Carolina State 90. In the final home game of the season, the Tigers set a Littlejohn Coliseum scoring record when they defeated Florida Southern. For the 5th time during the season, the Tigers eclipsed the century mark. Final score, Clemson 122, Florida Southern 79. Once again, the 1977-78 academic year saw two number 1 Tigers. Randy Addison was the number 1 Tiger during the 1977 football season. Randy earned a Bachelor of Science degree in ceramic engineering in 1979. His hometown was Lancaster, South Carolina. Randy passed away in 1980. Here is his story as given to us by Chris Carter, his close friend and roommate. It's always sad when a member of your family is no longer with you. We lost another member of the Clemson family in 1980 when Randy Addison passed away after an automobile accident. Randy was a great Tiger, a good friend, a Sigma Alpha Epsilon fraternity brother, and my roommate for 2 years. If Randy was here, I'm sure this was one of his best experiences. During the 1977 and 1981 football seasons, a radio announcer in North Carolina offered a bounty of $100 for the tail of the Clemson Tiger. By the time we played Virginia Tech in Blacksburg, Virginia, on October 1st, the bounty had grown to either $200 or $400, depending on who you talked to. Hearing about the bounty, Randy took the mascot suit home to his parents' house in Lancaster. He asked his mother, Beulah, if she could add some reinforcements to the base of the tail. She did by using almost an entire spool of carpet thread. We later learned that was about the strongest thread you could find at that time. When he picked up the uniform a couple of days later, she told him, "Randy, if anyone gets this tail, they're getting you too, because it's not coming off." There were no attempts to get the tail for the first 3 games of that season, and we were beginning to think the bounty was just talk. That changed, however, at halftime during the Virginia Tech game. It was an overcast day in Blacksburg that Saturday, and by game time a steady cold rain began to fall. At halftime, the cheerleaders decided to cross the field to find shelter in the tunnel below the home stands. About the time we entered the tunnel, a loud roar erupted from the stands behind us. We turned around, wondering what was happening, when one of our cheerleaders, A-Line Cruz, ran up and shouted, "They have Randy, and they're trying to get his tail." Randy was a strong, athletic guy who could handle himself in most situations. Well, not wanting him to have all the fun, I immediately took off to see what was happening. Running full speed, I saw Randy on the far sidelines, fighting to keep his tail from a group of 8 to 10 Virginia Tech cadets, all in dress uniform. The cadets had marched down the sidelines, pretending to be part of the halftime show. Being the Tiger, Randy decided to march along with them, swinging his tail and clowning around at their expense. Well, the clowning came to a sudden end when one of them yelled, "Now!" He knew he had been set up when they broke rank and surrounded him, each one grabbing for the tail, trying to be the one to collect the bounty. Randy had the tail pressed against his body, gripping it with both hands, and was twisting and turning, trying to keep them from getting a hand on it. They were all tightly bunched around Randy when I arrived at the ambush site, still in full sprint, and launched myself on top of the tightly packed group. All the cadets fell to the rain-soaked, muddy ground like so many tin soldiers. At some point, Randy's mask got turned halfway around, preventing him from seeing. When he felt someone bump and land next to him, he quickly wrapped his left arm around the person's neck, pulling him down and started punching him repeatedly. I guess Randy was thinking he was Hall of Famer wrestler Handsome Harley Race during the Battle Royale. Well, fortunately, he was wearing the carpet-thick gloves of his uniform and was holding his tail in his right hand, so his punches weren't that effective. I know because the neck he grabbed and the head he punched was me. Well, he finally realized it was me, and together we defended the tail from the cadets. It was a true tag-team melee until security personnel broke it up. I later heard from our fans it was the best halftime show they'd ever seen. And just for the record, no one ever collected the bounty. Rest in peace, my dear friend. Final score, Addison Carter, winners of the Battle Royale, followed by Clemson 31, Virginia Tech 13. The other number one Tiger in 1977 was Chris Carter. Chris was the number one Tiger for the 77-78 basketball season. Chris earned a Bachelor of Science degree in Animal Science in 1979. His hometown, West Columbia, South Carolina. Here is his story. Randy Addison, the number one Tiger mascot during the 1977 football season, wanted to experience the excitement of being a cheerleader before he graduated, so we switched positions during the 1977-78 basketball season. I had a blast being the Tiger, but as any mascot will tell you, nothing compares to being the mascot on Saturdays during football season. That being said, the following stories are about traditions that exist today. With a lot of traditions, the history of when, how, or why they began is sometimes lost to history. Well, not these. I made the cheerleading squad in the spring of 1977. At our last meeting practice before breaking for the summer, George Langstaff, our head cheerleader, along with future head cheerleader Joey Irwin, yeah, I know he goes by Joe now, challenged each of us to come up with a new cheer. I was a former high school jock and Clemson wrestler, so I didn't know a lot about cheering. I accepted their challenge and came up with the idea of the fans spelling Clemson around the stadium. Several things came to mind as the idea began to develop. One, I had never heard of anyone doing this at other schools. Two, I felt it would give every fan in the stadium a chance to get involved in a cheer. Three, and most importantly for our team, I thought it would be a distraction, if only for a few moments, to the opposing team, which could give our team a temporary advantage. After all, isn't that what cheerleaders are supposed to do? At the end of the summer, when the squad met, George and Joey reminded us of their challenge. When I explained the cheer, there was some doubt as to whether the fans would know what we were trying to do and then do it. Several of the girls came up with the idea of putting large orange letters on white poster board. Then the cheerleaders would hold up one in front of each of the 7 sections of the stands when it was time to yell. We knew we could get the student section to start the cheer by yelling the letter C, but we really weren't sure about the other sections. Oh, ye of little faith! It took only a few starts before the crowd caught on, and after that a new cheer unique to Clemson became a tradition. We brought the letters to the next game, but quickly learned we didn't need them. Doing push-ups would become the second tradition that was started during the fall. This is the tradition of having the Tiger do push-ups after every score. That's one push-up for every point after every score. It started with a discussion by one of the cheerleaders who had seen the Penn State Nittany Lion mascot do this at a game. Okay, so we borrowed the idea from Penn State, but they were not in our conference, and we thought it would go over well with our fans. It did, and another tradition was born. Randy Addison was the first Tiger to do push-ups during a football game. Although not nearly as popular as they once were, you still see more than the occasional fan wearing orange overalls to Clemson sporting events. For those of you who weren't around in the mid to late 70s, white loose-fitting painter pants were the cool thing to wear. It soon followed that white overalls also came into vogue. This was the era of coaches Charlie Pell from 1977 to 78 and Danny Ford from 1978 to 1989. We were beginning to win a lot of football games, and because of that, Clemson was starting to get noticed more on the national level. Our arch rivals in Columbia had always called us a cow college. Playing to that image, but still being stylish and making it something uniquely Clemson, the cheerleading squad began wearing orange overalls. No one had ever seen orange overalls, much less worn them to a game. Well, like the saying goes, where there's a will, there's a way. I remember calling my mother, Jeanette, and asking if it would be possible to dye white overalls Clemson orange. She said yes, and to bring all of them home and she would dye them orange. I believe we purchased our overalls from Judge Keller's store. During the following week, and at my mother's direction, my dad, Fred, purchased all the orange RIT fabric dye he could find from Columbia to Sumter, all the way to Florence. I guess there wasn't a huge demand for orange dye at that time, especially in the middle of the state. Thanks to my mom and dad and to a cheerleading squad willing to take a fashion risk, a week later we were wearing orange overalls and another tradition was born. By the time school started the next fall, orange overalls were in stock at Mr. Knickerbocker and many other fine Clemson clothiers. Much to our surprise and delight, we began seeing fans wearing them to games. Even the Tiger said he needed a pair. 16 years later, the Tiger Cub was introduced to the world wearing a set of purple overalls. As Paul Harvey used to say, now you know the rest of the story. The final Tiger in the 70s was Zack Mills. Zack was the number one Tiger during the 1978 through 80 academic years. Zack earned a Bachelor of Science degree in Animal Science in 1980 and a Doctor of Veterinary Medicine degree in 1982 from the University of Georgia. His hometown, Greenville, South Carolina. Here is Zack's story. My one and only goal was to be the Tiger, even though I was required to try out to be a cheerleader. Clemson students, my advice is to try out to be a mascot. Where else do you have the opportunity to be like the legendary silent comedian Harpo Marx? I was fortunate that both years I was the mascot, the university purchased a new suit. The bad thing is they were only dry cleaned once every 2 or 3 months. You need a good roommate like mine, Ben Benji Everett, to put up with the odor of the suit airing out in your living room. The early 1970s were not good to the Tigers. However, when I came around in 1978, the Tigers were back to their football dominance in the ACC. It was easy to be a good Tiger when your sports programs are winning. The 1978 First Friday Parade was in its 5th year. I got to ride to the pep rally in a Jeep with President Edwards. The question is, why did R.C. and I eat 3 goldfish at the pep rally? The beverage of choice at the time was not Gatorade, so you can imagine how I felt with those goldfish swimming around in my stomach. Now, what made me think about doing push-ups in the end zone the next day? Sounded like a good idea before we kicked off against the Citadel. It was not until late in the game when it became a problem. I pleaded on my knees with my hands folded to Coach Charlie Pell not to score another touchdown. Once a good idea quickly became a bad idea, having already completed 288 push-ups during that game. Final score, Clemson 58, the Citadel 3. A week later, I didn't have to worry about doing push-ups. The Tigers never crossed the goal line against the Bulldogs. However, I got a call into Dean Walter Cox's office on Monday after the game. It seemed that the Georgia band director didn't appreciate me borrowing an instrument from a member of Tiger Band and joining their performance. Final score, Georgia 12, number 8 Clemson, nothing. One of my regular routines on game day was being raised to the sky by members of Tiger Band's flag line using their poles. It was a great skit we performed each week, but what's up with the 8 a.m. practice? Not a good time for rehearsal for a dehydrated mascot. The best road trip of the year was when we traveled to Wake Forest. It was their homecoming game, and in true mascot tradition, it was important that I get a kiss from the Queen. Off I went looking for her court so I would have an escort to her Royal Highness. Unfortunately, I don't have a picture with the Queen. However, I don't seem to be complaining in a picture I have with a couple of their cheerleaders. The next day in the Charlotte Observer, the recap of the game was about me wearing a military outfit during the game. I stood on the Wake Forest 20-yard line all day long because the Deacons rarely crossed the 50-yard line. Final score, number 16 Clemson 51, Wake Forest 6. By the end of the regular season, we had won the ACC championship and were ranked 10th in the country when the Gamecocks came to Death Valley. Nothing like getting a bag of chicken feed and throwing it toward our guests. One thing for sure, the chickens liked the feed better than the final score. Final score that day was number 10 Clemson 41, South Carolina 23. A month later, we were headed back to the Gator Bowl for the second consecutive year, this time to play Coach Woody Hayes and his Ohio State Buckeyes. I can remember one of the officials telling me, "Stay away from Coach Hayes." Instead of trying to score field goals, Coach Hayes was greedy and wanted to score touchdowns against what he felt was an inferior Clemson team. After an interception by Clemson's middle guard Charlie Bowman, who was tackled out of bounds on the Ohio State sideline, Coach Hayes grabbed and struck Bowman in the throat area. This punch would cause his dismissal as head coach by the Ohio State administration. It was a big win for the Tigers, but no one remembers the score. Final score, number 7 Clemson 17, number 20 Ohio State 15. Everyone liked the push-up idea, however, not on the ground and in the end zone as was done previously. With the help of Tommy Brown, the first-ever push-up board was built for the 1979 season. The original board was made of wood and was held up by the cheerleaders. Today, the Tiger does his push-ups on a board made of lightweight aluminum, and it's a panel that's hosted high up in the air by cadets from the ROTC detachments. Prior to Clemson's first trip to Notre Dame Stadium in South Bend, Indiana, in November, Dean Cox called me into his office. He said by no means was I to grab an instrument and join the Notre Dame band. Well, as television actor Jim Nabors would say when he portrayed Gomer Pyle, Shazam! It was about time someone woke up those echoes in South Bend, and that's exactly what I did. However, this time Dean Cox never received a letter from the Notre Dame band director. Everyone enjoyed my performance, except the Gipper, the Ghost of the Four Horsemen, and Newt Rockne. Final score was number 14 Clemson 16, Notre Dame 10. New Year's Eve is supposed to be a fun evening. However, when it's 34 degrees and raining, it wasn't for the Tigers and their fans in Fulton County Stadium in Atlanta for that 1979 Peach Bowl. Although I was nice and comfortable in my suit, I came up with the idea that it would be fun to wrestle with 2 live bears that Baylor had for mascots. The Clemson football team and I both found out that day bears are stronger than a tiger. I went home with a lot of bruises and a sore knee that still bothers me today. Final score, number 19 Baylor 24, number 18 Clemson 18. The 2 years I was the Tiger, we had a very good men's basketball team. The games were fun. However, just like football games, the suit, which felt like it was made of carpet, was still hot to wear. I spent most of my time sliding across the basketball court during timeouts and trying to stay out of trouble with Colonel Rick Robbins. The colonel was the academic advisor for the athletic department and the advisor for the mascot and cheerleaders. The colonel was extremely upset with me after Maryland Hall of Fame coach Charlie "Lefty" Drizel pointed at me as the person causing the basket to move due to me leaning against it. Well, thankfully, there were stabilizing wires from the backboard to the ceiling of Littlejohn Coliseum. This night, the wires were moving due to the building shaking. The student body was jumping up and down during this historic win over the nationally ranked Terrapins. The colonel feared that we would get a technical foul called against us. It was one of the few times I was totally innocent. Final score, number 16 Clemson 90, number 7 Maryland 81. Just like 1965-66 Tiger Pogue Reed, I went on to become a veterinarian. I opened Tiger Tails Animal Hospital in 2013 in Duluth, Georgia, the same year Clemson defeated the Georgia Bulldogs 38-35. Like any true Clemson fan or alum, I display a Clemson flag in front of my hospital. Win or lose, we always fly the flag. It's great for business, It doesn't hurt that I have the tiger's tail from the suit hanging in my office. Plus, it's a great beginning for the name of the business.